You can do everything and really, really try and fail. That's absolutely 100% possible. But it is impossible to succeed if you don't try. One of the things that people often do is they write themselves out of the game. They will write themselves off. They will say, why should I go for this? I'm unqualified. Why should I do this? Why should I even try? And like, you have to at least believe that you've got a shot before the world will give you a shot. The world is happy to tell you no. You've got to at least try.
Welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of 2 amazing daughters, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. And now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. Jahan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. All right, so basically for the listeners, Jahan's been a corporate governance analyst, a financial service analyst, a barrister at law, partner at 2 different law firms, and also been a course coordinator for 6 years at Sydney City School of Law. But beyond that, and the far more interesting side, I'd say, is that he is a human rights activist, especially with mental health and mental health advocacy in law, a TEDx speaker, and recently married as well. Welcome.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear somebody recount your biography back to you, because you're like, I did do that. And at the time, it was not that impressive. But when it's all read back in like one paragraph, it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm curious about how you got to where you are now. But before we explore your journey, I always ask this question first. How do you define success?
I've had a lot of, I spent a lot of time kind of unpacking your prompt because it's a good question. And I think that I've kind of landed on success as a process, and it's sort of the enjoyment of progress towards different goals at different times. Because having an abstract or external idea of success is like saying to somebody who's like a chess grandmaster, what's the best move? You can't answer that. It really is context dependent. And I was really trying to figure it out, and I realized, what success meant to me 12 months ago or 10 years ago, or what it'll mean to me tomorrow will probably be different. The only thing that has been consistent is that it's always when I'm moving towards something, particularly something I believe in, that I felt like I'm successful.
And so how have you defined, or if you're able to explore, how have you defined things that are important to you and things that you've moved towards? How have you known that you've been in, it kind of sounds like a state, like a flow state. How have you known that you've been in that kind of successful state or that successful frame of mind?
Well, it's so funny, right? When I was younger, maybe, 18, 19, 20, or even younger, success to me was always some external thing. I'm going to get my law degree. I'm going to practice law. I'm going to get this big job. I'm going to go out with this person, whatever have you. And it, it was always sort of, it never felt natural, like moving towards it. It was just something you did because everyone else was sort of going and doing it. Um, what I found as you've gotten older, and I'm getting more esoteric as I get older, which is unusual. Usually it's the other way around. But sort of success leaves clues, and you do know when you're on the right track. Generally, I guess the biggest clue for me is I'm I'm moving. I'm trying really hard to solve a problem that's important to me and not getting anywhere, and I'm not feeling like giving up. That to me is a pretty good sign that I'm I'm moving in the right direction, because things that you don't particularly care about, that don't align with your value structure, are not really things that fuss. I mean, you don't push extra hard to get them.
Right. If it's not valuable, you're not going to put in all the effort and all the energy in order to be able to achieve it. You're just going to give up.
You're not going to give up. You might inherently continue towards the goal, but it feels different. There's a real difference in the energy you put when you have to do something versus when you want to do something.
And how have you been able to kind of describe that? Because you just mentioned that it's when you're trying really hard to solve a problem. So there's an element of effort and energy behind it. You're actually putting your energy towards it, and you're not getting away. So you're feeling stuck, even though it's all about enjoyment of progress towards. But you're feeling stuck. You're not getting away, and you don't give up. So
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. I mean, look, success is not linear.
mm,
It's progress is not linear. When you know, if you look at a simple slice towards a goal, often it may even feel like you're going backwards. But it's really like climbing a mountain. Some days the terrain is downhill. Some days the correct terrain is straight. But if there is this trend that moves upwards, and you can sense that you're moving upwards, even if at the very moment that you take that slice, it's actually you're going down into the valley or something. That's kind of when it clicks. And when I have really cared about something, when something's really made me feel passionate, and I'm in one of those valleys or I'm going through some challenges, I find myself less inclined to simply go, well, this is not worth pursuing. Whereas when it's a goal that's externally given to or given to me by someone else, or it's someone else's priority that doesn't align with my value structure, and I'm in that valley, I'm far more inclined to be like, ah, what's the point? There's no point.
yeah, right. If it's not your values, it's not your passion, and if it's not your passion, you're not pursuing it. And the process kind of sounds to you as if it's like the energy you're putting in order to pursue a specific outcome. Not so much about the outcome, but it's the fact that what the actions you're taking towards that outcome are aligned with your values.
Well, that's right. And I think that's probably a part disposition naturally. And secondly, it's certainly something that you learn in my practice as a lawyer, particularly a lawyer that takes on cases that are exceptionally difficult, that are very litigious, that are very filled with conflict, and often against an opponent that is larger, that has a lot more on their side. You really start, you develop probably as a defense mechanism. I do my best. I'm not married to the outcome. So I will go there and give it 100%. If I don't get the right outcome, there's an appeals process and whatnot, but I can only do my best because often in law, particularly the law of that I practice, the best you can do is getting a less bad outcome. It's always going to be a bad outcome. It's always going to be terrible. The situation's always going to suck. Someone's going to leave very, very unhappy. It's about minimizing that and making it as good as you can get in a bad situation. It's running a bad lose. It's battlefield medicine. It's trauma surgery. It's never going to be good. If you're in front of a trauma surgeon, it's never a good situation. It can be worse and it can be better, but it's never good. That's sort of the some of the work that we do.
Right. A less bad outcome. And if you took that to the extreme, I know I'm getting esoteric now. If you took that to the extreme, you said that someone's out there murdering 5 people a year. It's like, well, if we can just get them down to murdering 1 person a year, that's a less bad outcome.
Well, it's more like this person has done this bad thing.
Hmm.
This person will go to jail. This person deserves jail. There is a range between 5 years to 10 years. My job as the defense lawyer is to make sure that it is towards the bottom of the range, assuming it's appropriate.
Hmm.
And the prosecution's job in an adversarial system is to get them 10 years, assuming it's appropriate. But it's never going to be nice to sit with someone, even if they deserve it, and tell them, hey, you're going to jail for 10 years or you're going to jail for 5 years. And it's actually the person, it's not as hard. It's telling their kids or telling their wife or telling someone, hey, I'm really sorry, I did my best, but this person that you love is going to jail for 5 years. Or, hey, I did my best, but this asylum seeker who risked everything to come to Australia, our government's going to send them back to a war zone. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that they're going back to a place where, because of their beliefs, they'll be killed, or because of how they look, they'll be killed. That's never nice. And it's not particularly binary. Sometimes it's a range of terrible things. There's never going to be a situation where somebody pats you on the back and goes, great, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. And what you're saying, and this is amazing that you're sharing it. It's really cool insight. But what you're sharing here is that even though you've done your absolute best, and the person still ends up getting sent back to a war zone, for example, it's an extreme example, and it's probably very practical and real for you. And they're getting sent back. You're like, well, I've done the best I possibly could. It's the least bad I possibly could have made it, and you still feel successful.
It's that's why the process is what I guess that's why the process is what I've had that. I've had that. They keep you up at night. You ask yourself, could I have done more? Could I have figured something else out? And you slowly over time stop asking those type of questions. What you really ask yourself is, if someone else took this on, could they have achieved as good an outcome as you had with the tools you had at your disposal? And the answer, if it's yes, then you need to reassess whether you should be in this position, because if you haven't done your best, that's on you. But it's almost ridiculous to ask yourself, well, if we were in a different political climate and we had a different government that was a different way, and this particular situation happened, would it be the same? That I don't ask myself those questions anymore. So for me, it's, did I give it 100%? Did I bring all of the things that I knew to bear? Obviously, from time to time, there's tactical decisions that you regret. I zigged when I should have zagged. But if it was not a foreseeable thing, you live with that. Um, every lawyer knows in their heart of hearts that an innocent person that they've represented has gone into jail. I know that for sure. Every lawyer in their heart of hearts knows that there was people who probably lied to us and said they didn't do it when they did, and we presented their case fairly, and they may have gotten away with something they shouldn't have gotten away with. But to me, at least morally, it's always worse when someone you know to be innocent has gone into custody. It's far better for guilty people to go free than innocent people to languish. That's not just my belief; that's the belief of the entire legal system. And from a very practical and pragmatic perspective, I take the view that the system will always be awful. It will always, I mean, try renewing your car license. What a headache that is. And imagine that, and that is a standard process that we have had forever and is easily set up to be. It's hard. Now imagine something where the entire force of the state is saying you've done something. It's never a pleasant process. All I can do is make it as okay for my client as possible and advocate their position as assertively as possible. And that's all I can do. And that to me is what success looks like. Success is a client looking me in the eye, and this happens sometimes, and it makes you, a client looking you in the eye and saying, Jahan, the outcome sucks, but I know you did your best. And I know that, I know you really cared. And it sucks for me. It's not fair. We'll go through the appeals process, but I know you did your best.
Okay. All right. Well, let's thank you for sharing all that. Let's
Sure.
dive into your journey. Start from as early as you want to. Quite a few guests like to start from their childhood. Gives a good sense for those looking up to you as a mentor. What was it like when you were growing up? How did that help shape and form you? What are some of the challenges you faced along the way, and then your career decisions and all of that? Let's dive into it.
Yeah, so I'm a first generation Australian. My family is from Iran. My mother and father are both from Iran. They met in Iran. And for those of your guests who don't know, Iran had a revolution. There was the Iran-Iraq War that went for a very long period of time, almost a decade, million dead, horrible conflict. And my parents left Iran to come to Australia to build a better life for us. Now, my parents were both physicians. They're both doctors. They practiced medicine in Australia. They practiced it in Iran. So we came to Australia as skilled migrants, but basically as refugees. We had my grandparents had come here sort of earlier and started. They were thinking of retiring here. They never wanted to, bring their whole family and stuff here. They always wanted to go back to Iran, but my family came here and they, they were very young. They're in their 20s. And they've got a child and they've got to start their life from scratch. So, mum and dad worked super duper hard. They, took pretty menial jobs just to keep food on the table, and they had to get reaccredited, which meant they had to do a lot of their medical studies again. And so for the first, I want to say 10, 15 years of my life, it's just my parents doing really, really giving it 100% to just try to get back to where they were in Iran. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandparents were, are huge parts of my life. And a weird thing sort of happened at around 13, 14, that my parents actually did become doctors. And economically and socially, there's a huge difference between, students and professionals. And we sort of had some more money in our pockets and various other things. And I noticed there was a market change in the way that I was treated, even though nothing had really changed. And it took me a very long time to unpack that as I got older, but I realized that there was a difference in the way that we treat people who are poor versus people who have money. And it really shaped me in the sense that I thought that was unfair. It didn't sit right with me. And it really made me want to help people, regardless of whether they had money or not. So I think that was one of the really big lessons, things that kind of sat and sort of started me on this journey. Another thing that happened when I was fairly young, when I was in primary school, it's such a small thing, but it had such a big role. I was in a classroom one day. I was chatting with a friend, and the teacher said, "You two knock it off." We shut up. And then the teacher said, "You smirked at me," and I hadn't. And she said, "That's it. You're on detention." Like a 15-minute recess detention. And I remember sitting there. I still remember it vividly. And I was just like, this is so unfair. I didn't do this. And it's not fair that I'm in this situation. And it just felt so powerless and shitty. And I was like, I don't like this feeling. And I would like not to ever feel it again. And I would probably like no one else to ever have to feel this way. And now that I'm a lawyer and I think backwards, I go, wow, that was probably the genesis of this, because one of the great joys or gifts in life, at least for me personally, is helping people through a situation that you yourself have been through. That's really satisfying for me. And kind of opening a door for someone else to go through that you yourself really struggled with. So those are sort of a bit of, I guess to give you a little bit of context about me. I'm very lucky. I've always been pretty book smart. I don't think I say that with any arrogance. I went to a selective school. I went to university. And when I think a big part of, particularly when I'm growing up, seeing that difference, when you don't know what you're going to do, you think, well, I'll get a job that seems interesting. So I studied a commerce degree, and I went and worked as a banker for a little while. And it just wasn't for me. There's nothing wrong with bankers. Some of my best friends are bankers, but it just didn't kind of align with me. And so while I was sort of, the GFC happened, it gave me a good excuse to be, well, banking's not stable. I'll go into something else. And I decided to go to law school. And so I kind of worked at the bank, graduated night school, went to law school, and graduated as a lawyer thinking I'll go get a job working at a firm in banking law because that's what I know. And nobody was hiring banking lawyers, but they were hiring criminal lawyers. And at the time, there weren't a lot of young Middle Eastern lawyers. We're talking about a decade ago, 2013. There weren't a lot of young Middle Eastern lawyers. There were a lot of young Middle Eastern people accused of crime. And so I was hired by a firm. Before I went to the bar, I was hired by a firm, and sort of represented a lot of people who looked like me, people who, and one of the things about the law that's really interesting is it is one of those places where you want someone who has some understanding of your cultural experience. You want someone who looks like you, who can relate to some of the things you've gone through. And so I found myself doing a lot of these cases. And even though I never set out to be a criminal defense lawyer, it was never in my wildest dreams something I wanted to do. I found that I liked it. I found that I felt like I was making a difference. It really spoke to me. So I went to the bar. I practiced primarily in crime before starting to do a bit of family law. And I started taking on cases that were very, very challenging because people were like, well, please help us. And I'm a really soft touch. If someone comes to me with a story or a challenge, I sort of want to help them. And I did that for a few years working at the bar. I loved it. It was a fantastic job. And then, unfortunately, my grandfather, who I'm very close with, he had a stroke. And I'll never forget, I was in a trial. I was in the third week of a 4-week trial. And I just remember getting this news that my grandfather's really unwell. And I just realized, well, you can't stop the trial. It's like surgery. You can't stop. You're in the middle of this thing. And it doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life. You can't stop. And I realized, well, that doesn't align with my values. As much as I love this job, being there for my family and putting my family first really matters to me. It matters a great deal. And so I finished that trial, and I made a very difficult decision of going, instead of being the barrister, the face, the tip of the spear, to starting a solicitor's practice and having people working with me so that I could create that level of space if I needed to. And it was a challenging decision, but it was the right one for me, and it allowed me to be there for my family and sort of support them. So that's a lot of people wonder, well, usually it's solicitor then barrister. Why would you go the other way around? That was the reason, because to me that was very important. And ever since then, over the last decade, my primary thing has been doing a lot of stuff around the law, particularly helping people with high conflict cases. We're a litigation law firm. We give some advice, but a lot of us is going to court, going to mediations, going to this, that, and the other, and assisting people with whatever they need help with, helping them through. Our motto is we're there to help. We're here to help, particularly during the hardest times of your life. So I do a fair bit of that. Also do a lot of I spend a lot of my time also talking about mental health, particularly in law. We have a mental health crisis. I believe a lot of lawyers are going through a lot of stuff psychologically. Law, the focus on the negative, the challenge, a lot of that stuff's really toxic, and I try my best to talk about that. And yeah, talking about things like resilience, talking to young lawyers, educating them, telling them that there is a different way to do this pretty old profession.
Okay,
So I
cool.
guess that's kind of my story.
Yeah, this has raised a lot of questions throughout it to explore. You were saying that the investment banking or banking itself, it just didn't feel right for you. It didn't align with you. Do you want to talk to me about that? Why didn't it align, and what were some of the moments that helped you realize that it just didn't align?
Well, I think that to be to be really successful, one of the things that I've found, because you one of the things that's really important is having people around you that are successful. So once you've got that tribe, it really does get a lot easier. But whenever you talk to someone who's really successful, they care about the end user. They do. There's something about that end user that kind of attracts them. I was working in corporate financial services. I didn't have much of a corporate financial background. I wasn't Banking is important. It's really, really important for people to be able to access finance and or services to grow their business and their dream. As someone who has a business now, without my banker, I'm screwed. If they can't facilitate a million and one things, it causes difficulty for me. But when I was the banker, the provision of those services didn't make me jump up and say, yes, this is something that really excites me. It just didn't. I can't tell you why it didn't. I worked with perfectly nice people. I worked with lovely, intelligent people. Just didn't align with me. Um, and I kind of knew it early on. I stuck it out for a little while, but I kind of knew pretty early on this wasn't for me. Um, and I can't tell you why. And I think that's one of the interesting things I found as I've gotten a little bit older. You always sort of know, but you don't know how you know.
I think I know what you're referencing, and the reason I'm asking is a lot of people listening to this might be thinking about making a career change, or might be considering a career change, or they might feel like they're in a position similar to what you're describing. They're in a spot, they're doing pretty well, or they're doing okay. They don't really want to change just yet. Like they're like, I do want to change, but I don't. It feels like it's too big of a shift, whatever. And so they're sticking it out for too long. Um, what was the moment you decided? I know you said GFC was kind of just an opportune time, but what was the moment you decided I'm not going to stick in this anymore? It just doesn't align to my values.
I guess a big part of maybe it's me personally. Maybe I'm risk averse. Maybe it's the part starting in Australia as refugees. But for me, I didn't go all in on leaving. Like it wasn't just like, hey, I'm out, bye. It was like, okay, I have a plan now. I've enrolled in night school. I've been accepted. I've done a semester. I like it. It's good. All right. I can work during the day and take a couple of units at night. I can manage this. And for me, I think a lot of people are running from what they dislike. Now, I disliked it, but it was never so bad that I said, well, screw this, I'm out, I'm going to do something else. I think there's a lot of risk to that. Sometimes it pays off, and you often hear the stories of it paying off. You don't hear the story of the guy going like, "Yeah, I left my accounting business to become a DJ, and I lost everything." Like you don't hear those stories because they're not sexy. But it happens. It happens with regularity, and so for me, it was, well, how do I keep one foot in this world and that foot? And then when I saw that there's really a future for me in the law, and that I can make a living doing it, and there was tough times. I mean, when I started my practice, God, that was a huge risk that I took. That was when I had to go all in and kind of push the chips to the table. But it was really exploring something and seeing whether I could have one foot in both worlds before I made that leap.
Yeah, you're managing your risk overall. I guess that's very potent. Were you seeking advice from anyone, or did anyone help you along that journey?
Yeah, so it was funny. A lot of the people in my life that loved me the most were giving me well-meaning advice, like, well, just tolerate it for like 2 or 3 decades, and then like if you don't like it, then retire. And they meant well. It makes sense. You've lost everything you've lost everything to come to a new country. You've got a stable job in a stable entity. What's more stable than a bank? We now know that banks and these entities are absolutely not stable, and that the big risk is not taking risk. But these people gave me advice that was well-meaning but ill-formed. It was actually, ironically, my grandfather. Both of them. The first one said, "You're good at talking. Lawyers seem to talk a lot. Just go do that. And if you fail or if it goes badly, you can always live with us." It was very sweet of them. You can always come and live with us, and you're not gonna be homeless. And that was one. And the second one was like, look, we risked everything to give you what your life looks like. And if you're not happy and you're not enjoying your life and you're not moving forward doing things that matter, what was the risk for? We left everything we knew to come here. And if you're not like, what we did it really in part for you. So that was really powerful counsel. And I'll never forget, I had to take a loan out to basically get the business started. And I was like terrified about this. And my grandfather came in and he said, you don't have to go to a bank. I'm going to loan you the money. And it was like $20,000, but it might have well as been a million, 10 million. It was all the money in the world at the time. And just having someone that you love believe in you made all the difference. A big part, I guess, of if you want to call it success, is that I've always been lucky enough to have people that I respect believe in me. And for a lot of people that I've seen struggle through life, they just haven't had that.
And I guess the empowering message behind that, right? People who are struggling or they don't have those people around them who believe in them, is that you can always start with yourself. Like the reason that you're successful is only in part because of those people who are believing in you. The main reason behind it is because of their actions led to you having an internal belief that you then believe in yourself, right?
I think so. And look, I come from a position of extreme privilege. You know what I mean? Like, not everyone's grandfather can write them a check for $20,000. Some people will go to a bank and a bank will tell them no, and that's it. There's your dream. It's gone. So it is. It's easy for me to say, as someone who's been given a leg up, how it's possible, and for many people it's not. But I can tell you this: you can do everything and really, really try and fail. That's absolutely 100% possible. But it is impossible to succeed if you don't try. And so one of the things that people often do is they write themselves out of the game. They will write themselves off. They will say, why should I go for this? I'm unqualified. Why should I do this? Why should I even try? And like, you have to at least believe that you've got a shot before the world will give you a shot. The world is happy to tell you no. You've got to at least try. And so I guess a roundabout way of saying is I agree with you, Harry. Like, I 100% agree that you need to have this internal belief that you're going to make it, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that you won't.
Or at least that it's better to have tried than to have not tried at all.
It is. I mean, look, it's hard to give that advice as a general proposition because self-confidence is not as important as self-awareness.
Right.
And I think we have a real crisis of self-awareness. People are really very poor at assessing what their strengths and weaknesses are. I can tell you quite objectively, I am very, very bad at almost everything. The one thing I'm pretty good at, I think, and I've really spent a lot of time assessing whether this is true or not, is what I feel in my heart and in my mind. I'm pretty good at least conveying a facsimile of that to you. Now, it manifests in different modalities. It manifests perhaps in when I'm in court, the judge, the jury, the mediator, the arbitrator, at least accepting that I know what I'm talking about because I do. And perhaps, hopefully, if you're listening to me on this podcast, you can sense I may be misguided, but at least I'm sincere. That is pretty much the one really big skill that I have. I'm okay at a lot of stuff. That's my big skill. And I'm bad at most things. The problem we have is that there are a lot of educated people who are not particularly, they've got education, but they don't have skills. Because what you need is education. Then you need to take that education and go through the process of training and turn that experience into skills. Skills are what people need. Skills is the gift. You know what I mean? A skill is I can write a piece of code. I can fix a generator that's exploded. I can fly a helicopter. These are skills. Reading about it in a book, which is what we seem to encourage a lot of people to do, is not the skill itself. And so, one of the challenges I've seen is a lot of people have a real misconception about how good they are because they're educated or they've got some training. And until you turn those things into skills, they're not useful. So to me, self awareness is really important. You know, you don't want to be that person on X Factor that we all laugh at. It's awful. You don't want to be that person. And there's a lot of people who walk around like that. So that's why I don't think, as a general admonishment to everyone, you can say self confidence is the problem. But if you are self aware and you do know where your weaknesses are and you can fix those weaknesses, then yes, self confidence is the next thing you need. You
Right.
need to be well and truly accepting that, okay, I have this skill, I have this thing I can do, I need to chase it.
Right. So you're not even talking about like your take on growth mindset is slightly nuanced to a lot of others. Right? You're not. It sounds like you're not taking it from the approach of, you know, self having belief in yourself or having a growth mindset means that you have a lot of self confidence. It's like no. Sometimes you shouldn't have the self confidence. Like the best thing for you and part of your growth and development is to learn to hit the pavement and to learn. You don't actually have that confidence, or at least have the self awareness, whatever it takes to teach you. And the more important part for yourself, you're talking about the belief in yourself based on the foundation of self-awareness of what your actual strengths and weaknesses are, like an educated belief in yourself.
Well, that's right. I mean, look, I love Caroline Dweck. I love the work she did at Stanford. That book really changed a lot of things for me in terms of mindset. I mean, I'm talking about Caroline Dweck's book, Mindset, on
Yep.
the growth mindset. I'm sure if you're not familiar with it, go read it. As a general proposition, absolutely. The first step is you can get better at everything. That's what a growth mindset is. There is no limit to what you can achieve. That's important to accept and believe, regardless of anything else. But before you test yourself against the world, temper that idea that you can get better with everything with you actually have to take steps to get better at it. You actually have to do something. You have to take those steps, develop those skills, get what you need to get, and then go after your dreams. You might, everyone can become a better painter. Not all of us are going to be Picasso, Monet, Cezanne, and will certainly won't be any of them if we don't pick up a paintbrush and practice with intensity regularly and consistency. So the mindset always needs to be there. But if you think you have a talent to be a great painter, then you need to paint and you need to believe that you can get there eventually. And it's far less important what the external world believes than what you personally believe. But you also need to take in the input of the external world, which I think my concern is there's a whole subsection of the population probably that don't listen to your podcast that don't do that.
Yeah, look, what I love what you're sharing. And I want to link it right back to what you mentioned about encouraging people to read self-help books. There's a big difference if you're listening to this. Actually, to those who have listened to a few episodes now know that right at the end of every episode, I prompt the listeners to think about and take a moment to actually reflect on the conversation and to take at least one or two practical things from it that they can do in their life and schedule it right away. Like actually do something with it. The same thing is because I I used to be in a circumstance where I just kind of believed I knew everything. I had a lot of self-confidence, but without the self-awareness. And I was actually doing really well in a lot of different areas, but there are other areas which are failing. It was only when I had a belief shift that life short, make the most of it. But hang on, I don't actually yet know how to make the most of life. It's probably because I don't know everything enough. I don't know everything like I thought I did. I'm not a know-it-all. Surprise. I would actually start by picking up a book I'll go, okay, I want to learn about this book. Like, I want to learn about what this author's teaching me. But most people will read the book and go, oh, yeah, that's really interesting. Oh, yeah, yeah, cool. I'm so glad I read that book. I'm smarter now. That's wonderful. As opposed to picking up the book, getting to the end of a chapter, say chapter 3, there's a really awesome practical activity there, really awesome practical exercise. Put the bookmark in, put the book down, go and practice it. Actually do it. Try and emphasize. Because exactly what you say, like if you don't pick up the paintbrush, you're not going to get better at painting. If you keep talking about how wonderful you're going to be on the treadmill, and what type of stats you're going to do on the treadmill, and what type of shoes you're going to wear, and all the different tech that you're going to have while you're on it, and what times of days you're going to be practicing on it and training on it, and all the amazing accolades you're going to get after you've been training on it for a while. If you keep doing that, you're not going to get fitter. Just go and even run on the treadmill. Just get on it and go for a run. That's going to be far more impactful than anything else. So I love what you're sharing here. You're saying that you need to take into account that you still need to grow, and that there's a difference between where you are and where you want to be. And the only way you can bridge that gap is by taking the steps towards getting there. And then what about those areas in your life where you want to get better at, but you know that you'll never be exceptional at it, right? So you're obviously, let's just say that you still had that experience when you were young. It's just also unfair that the teacher put me in detention for something I didn't even do. I didn't do it. It's all unfair, whatever. I'm getting punished for something. And he still wanted to go out and help people uh, by defending them. Like, you still had that kind of unconscious seed which was planted, and you're still guided by it. But let's just say you were terrible at talking to people, that you're not a good communicator, that you're not able to come across as sincere and confident. Then what? Like,
Well, the value doesn't change, the manifestation of it does.
mm-hmm,
So I'm a klutz. I'm absolutely a massive klutz. Let's take a world where I'm not a klutz.
mm-hmm,
Well, let's take a world where I might have really steady hands. I might have good visual acuity. I can see things differently. If I want to make a more fair and even world, maybe I'll make housing for people with disabilities, and I can design homes that help them. Maybe I can design refugee centers that aren't horrible and on offshore islands where people are tortured. There is a lot of good you can do with the I think perhaps it's somewhat harsh to say self-awareness is lacking. What I can say is this: everyone has something that they're better at than the average person. They have a gift. And you can always deploy that gift to the best of your ability towards something that aligns with your values. As I've said, for me, one of the values that I really inspires and moves me is I want to, I can't I can't always understand other people's struggles. I do my best to empathize, but the reality is that some people's lives, situations are so different. It's almost condescending and patronizing for me to say, I understand what you're going through. I will never know what it's like for a mother to flee a war torn country with a child. I can say that I do, I can read books about it, but any attempt at me to say that I can viscerally understand that is unfair and it's unjust. It's not right. I will do my best to understand it. I will never know what it is like for some of the things that some of the people that I've had to help and deal with have gone through. What I can certainly do, though, is I know what it's like to be someone who, in a country like Australia, is considered something of an other. I can understand what it's like to take on a system that, at least on the outside, appears to be incredibly rigid and not open to change, like the law, and how to do it differently, and how to encourage people who may say, "Oh, you know what? My dad's Pakistani and my mom's Pakistani. I'm not going to be a lawyer. It's just not for people like me." I can, at least at the best of my ability, open the door a little bit for them. A beautiful phrase, I forget who says it, but they call it drawbridge migration. So if I can veer into the realm of the political, from a abstract concept, Mr. Rishi Sunak, who's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom,
mm-hmm,
it's a really good thing that he's a person of um, of a non-traditional Anglo-Saxon extraction. But the way that he conducts himself, at least what it was, the words that were used was, it's a drawbridge migrant. I've gotten through the drawbridge. I'm pulling the drawbridge up. Now that I've gotten here, it's going to be harder for everyone who comes after me. And I really liked that analogy because I think that's true. I think it's very easy now for people who have a vested interest in saying, no, 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 we're very cosmopolitan. There is no racism in Britain. And Britain's a perfect example because it's so obvious. There's no racism in Britain. Our prime minister is a person of color. So just watch yourself. When in fact, this person's belief structures or values, at least to me on the outside, are far worse than the most horrific racist you've ever seen. So I have the complete opposite structure. I think it's very cool that my family came here to Australia with nothing and that they could work and they could build something. And I would love to give that experience to as many people as I could. I would love to make that door easier. I know how hard my family struggled. I would like the next generation to struggle a little bit less. And if I can do that, I've achieved my values. To go back to the point that was originally raised, because sometimes lawyers like to meander, the the beauty is that I feel that I'm using my gift to achieve that purpose. If my gift was different, I would hopefully be seeking to achieve it using a different goal. If I had a natural enjoyment of banking and a real faculty with numbers, and I could use my ability to finance projects that helped achieve that goal, I would hopefully feel the same sense of calling that I feel when I do the work that I do.
I think that's a really powerful message. So anyone who's listening to this, and you've stuck with us for the 40 minutes or whatever it is so far, and you've been thinking, well, great, I'm not living a purposeful life. I'm not in line with my values or doing what I actually want to do. I'm just kind of getting along, keep my head above water, trying to look after my family and my kids, or just trying to do the right thing and kind of keep my head down and don't rock the boat too much, just be okay. That you even if you don't feel like you can make an impact where you are right now, or you don't feel like you can be purposeful where you are right now, it's never too late to start making changes. It's never too late to identify what are the areas that you could really make amazing changes in. Now, do you have any tips for how someone can start to define that? Like, let's say they're not at the level of self-awareness that you've seemed to naturally have for most of your life, and they don't.
I'll cut you off there. I was absolutely not self-aware. The reason that I'm so hypercritical on it, it was definitely a black spot for me.
Mm.
And over time, and only through time, have I realized that um, certainly it's very important to focus on what you're good at versus not. This didn't come naturally to me at all. It was me having an ill-formed belief that you can be great at everything and thinking that I was great at everything and consistently failing at lots of different things, that eventually I said, well, what are you actually really good at? Let's spend your time doing that. So it can be developed. I think it's called mindsight or insight. The ability to understand really what makes you tick is a developable skill. It's part of that growth mindset. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's good. It was straight into the question, which you're already starting to answer. How do people develop it? How would you suggest that people can develop it, or develop it even more than what they already have?
So when I teach my law school students, there's a question I always raise at the start of almost every semester, which is, what is the purpose of power? Okay. And really, once you sit down and this question, you could spend thousands of years, they have spent thousands of years trying to answer it. To me, there are two buckets, really. Bucket one is, do we use power? Is the purpose of power this? To help the best of us become as good as they can be, and in doing so, lift the rest of us up? Okay. Or two, is it to protect the weakest of us from what the powerful can do, and prevent, I guess, a real abuse of power from those at the top? That's really the two buckets. It's an incredible oversimplification. Now, everyone inherently aligns with A or B. Everyone says, no, it's to protect the weak from the strong. That's not true at all. I reckon it's probably about a 60-40 split. Everyone wants to seem like they're more, philanthropic than they are.
Yes.
If you genuinely in your heart, though, believe that the purpose is, I'm going to succeed, and when I succeed, I'm going to pull other people up, then the way that you look at cases, the way that you look at systems, the way you look at legislation, the way you look at what's happening in the political landscape and the economic landscape is going to be completely different. There's a filter there, right? That's going to be completely different than if you believe the purpose of the law is to protect the weak, is to nurture people, is to do this. It's a completely different filter. It's that story of the two wolves. Inside me is a wolf that is filled with hatred, greed, anger, pain. Inside of me is a wolf that is filled with love, support, joy, passion. Which wolf wins? The one you feed. So there's no right answer to that question. But what I'm telling you is inside of yourself, you sometimes, I like 80s action movies. I can't tell you why I like them. I just do. I like them. It's something that makes me happy. I see them. I think, this is cool. It's just dumb stuff that happens, and it entertains me immensely. Those things that naturally speak to you are kind of clues as to there'll be your clues to things like your interests, your passions, your hobbies, um, and your values. One thing that's really important to me is I don't want to leave people worse off than when I got them. I used to think I could help everyone. I now think that's not possible, but I can absolutely try to leave people in the same state I found them in or a little bit better. How does that manifest? When I get a coffee in the morning, I ask my barista how they're doing and I thank them. When I get cut off in the road, I try my best. I don't always succeed to be like, this person is probably having a real bad day. And so you kind of build in these things into your day that sort of align with your values. And you'll be surprised once you start doing that, opportunities will appear that align with your values more. And things will happen. Like us talking. This is a fantastic opportunity. If my value is I want to communicate and tell people mental health can be managed and mentioned, and all of a sudden I'm doing things that align with that. I'm talking about it online. I'm doing that. Well, things like you reaching out to me, being like, "Hey, Jahan, let's talk." It's a fantastic opportunity to promote that value, and so you'll be surprised how quickly the universe, life, whatever you call it, is going to give you chances and opportunities. It's almost like once you flip that switch, things will start to happen that you absolutely can't that you can't understand how they flow into your life.
I'll agree with that. There was a time during COVID, uh, sort of, I don't know, probably a few months in, people started drinking a whole lot more. Suddenly, I'd never helped anyone as a coach. I'd never helped anyone with drinking or anything like that. And in the same month, I had 5 clients reach out for help about drinking being their problem. I'm like, hey, I'm not an addictions coach. I'm not AA. I'm not your GP. I'm not the person to help you with this. It's like, no, 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 no. I've tried everything else. I have confidence that you can help me. Why me? Okay, fine. Uh, Ended up having all those 5 clients. They all stopped drinking, except for one. He didn't actually want to stop drinking. He just wanted to manage it. Uh, and that kind of just happened. It was a beautiful phase. It came into my life and it left. It taught me a hell of a lot and it made me better in almost all other areas of my life. People are like, wow, you've done so much for those people. I'm like, no, 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 no. They've done so much for me. I've learned so much more about myself through those conversations of being pulled into an entirely different environment, which I otherwise just wouldn't have helped people. And since then, there have been a few occasions where people, even just friends or family, have spoken to me about challenges with doing something too much or a bit of an addiction or someone I'm helping out with finances or start talking about this kind of stuff. And it's very easy to share some insights about how they can adjust. And it wouldn't have happened unless I was open to those challenges coming up. And I share this once again to re-emphasize the point that you're making. I didn't always have this. Like this was not me 6 years ago or 7 years ago. There was no way. And like I mean, this it sounds like this whole conversation's going towards growth mindset and overcoming challenges. Um, and I really like that. That's where this is flowing. Not what I'd expected. It's awesome. I mean, so you've shared a lot about how you've identified the gifts that you have. You've started to become more self-aware. You said you found that through a whole lot of different failures. Ultimately, like you kept realizing, nope, not this, not this, not this, not this, not this, and you weren't even necessarily looking for that being the thing. You just realized the world just told you, testing yourself against the world, that that's just not right. And eventually you found it, right? Because after all of this time with being in banking, you realized it wasn't value aligned. It just wasn't right because you're too far from the end user. It didn't feel rewarding. It didn't feel fulfilling. And so you decided to go through towards law. Now, you mentioned previously that it was about like no one was hiring banking lawyers at the time, right? That would have been the safest the safest route for you, right? The safest stepping stone. And somehow the stepping stone just vanished. You didn't have that stepping stone anymore. But people really wanted lawyers, and it seemed like people wanted to be represented by lawyers who were more similar to them. And there were a lot of people needing criminal defense who had the same skin color, similar backgrounds. How was that shift? Like, how is your how like what was happening in your mind as you were making that shift? How were you mitigating the risks, like what you're talking about? How confident were you that it was going to be very strongly value aligned, and that it wasn't a huge mistake that you were leaving corporate?
Um, Look, I made it up as I went along, and I can't. I mean, every other day I was like, "Am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right choice?" It was not this seamless sort of. It's a big difference between being a banker and being like a lawyer for generally a lot of people who were from underprivileged and underserviced communities. Um, but there was it's funny. I've never. It's crazy that I went into banking. I was never particularly driven by money. Money because I saw it at an early age. I know what it's like to be poor. I, okay, I can live with that. It's not nice. It's not, but it's not hell. It's not the worst. I know what poverty is. I know what it's like to watch people really graft hard. Um, and I know how much helping someone in poverty would make a difference for them. I get that. And so I I wasn't particularly driven by money, and also my age too. I didn't have kids, didn't have mortgages, I didn't have all of these financial commitments. I could afford to be a little bit selfish and a little bit crazy and take on sort of this new opportunity. Um, I didn't I didn't start as an excellent lawyer. I've done it a decade now. I feel it took me about 8 years, maybe 8.5 years to really feel like, okay, I know sort of what I'm doing. And it's a work in progress. I will never be perfect. There will always, it's why it's called a practice, because every day you're practicing. Um, but what I did find is I seemed to do a good enough job that other people would be told. They would go, "Hey, we heard about you from such and such. You did a good job for us, for my brother-in-law, sister, or whatever. Can you please help me?" And it was just showing up and trying to add value to situations that really helped. I was always, how can I help? And how can I help is really, how do I add value? A lot of people I found, unintentionally or otherwise, adopt a give me value lifestyle or existence. Okay. Hey, give me a job. Give me this. Give me that. Give me this opportunity. They don't show up and say, hey, how do I add value to this situation? And just having that shift has been really helpful for me.
Is that something which you've been doing very intentionally, or has it kind of become default second nature for you?
It certainly didn't start off that way, but now it's something that I consciously go out of my way to do. How do I add value? Um, you know, as people move through life, there's different situations and different circumstances and different insights and learnings you have. When I started, the reality was you say yes to everything, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You'll take on a client that you know you shouldn't take on deep, deep down because you need the money and because you are growing your practice or you're growing this, and that client will cost you 5 million times the money they bring in with headaches, with complaining, with this, with that. You will wish forever you didn't do it. And it's because you come from this place of, well, I have to. And every business and every organization goes through that. Doesn't matter. I've got friends who are plumbers, doctors, IT coaches, what have you. I'm sure you can relate to that particular sentiment. You
Yeah.
take on situations. You don't because you're growing something and you just have to take it all on.
Yeah, you feel like you have to take it all on, at least. Obviously, you don't.
And then, of course, you don't. And then eventually you reach a point where now, if there's a flip and the real skill is saying no to things because you've got to keep your eyes on the prize. Okay, that's kind of where I'm at in my career. There's so many great opportunities coming, but a lot of them are shiny objects. You've got to avoid them so you can keep focused on what actually matters and what actually brings value. And I don't know what the next phase will be. I'm sure there will be another phase after that. But when you're in that first phase, it's okay to feel like I've just got to take everything on. I've got to do it. It's not the right strategy, but you need to make that mistake for yourself. Everyone makes that mistake. You need to make it for yourself. And in the stage that I'm at now, it's very opportunities come hard and fast. Hey, do this. Do you want to do it? And you have to be like almost narrow minded. Sorry, I don't think it's the right fit for me. Please speak to this person or that person. But what I really try to do in terms of value add is if somebody comes to me with an opportunity and I'm not the right person, I always try to at least be like, hey, I can't help you, but I think these people can, or this might be the right thing for you, or I'm really sorry, it's not now, or hey, let me direct you, because I'm surprised with how often all it would take to fix a problem for someone is just a minuscule amount of some attention and kindness, and we're all just we're all just boats held together with duct tape, like you don't have to be mean to people. You don't have to be cruel. It's actually not impressive to push someone off a ledge. It's really impressive to pull them up. And so one of the challenges for me is how do I, without giving up too much of myself and not being there for the people that need me, give up value to help everyone that I can.
Yeah, look, I like this. This is really potent stuff because you're talking right towards purpose. And a lot of people um, whom I've coached or spoken to or gotten feedback from, a lot of people feel like they're really like the purpose or their mission or their vision for the future is just too ephemeral. It's just too esoteric. It's too weird. You just kind of can't touch it. It's too intangible. It's just not right. It doesn't make sense. And it's just kind of too hard to do it. And the message that you keep sharing, and hence why I keep emphasizing it, is you're talking about these small steps, just the small things you can start doing, the small progress you can start making towards being more purposeful, towards focusing on living a more purposeful life. And for you, that's been very clear as to how that more purposeful life has started showing up. But you've emphasized so many times it took you like halfway through your career until the more recent part of your career to even realize that you're on the more purposeful path or that you're on a more direct path.
You've nailed it. And look, I'm so lucky because I talk to a lot of people way more successful than me,
Mm.
who really feel like, oh, it's just a job, it's just a thing. There's that spark missing. And for those people, there's actually absolutely nothing wrong with your job just being your job, as long as you manifest your purpose in a different fashion. Or you can have a job that is okay with you, but you have a great family. In fact, I think it's Tony Robinson who says success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure, and I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
There is no price, there's no worldly success that would compensate for having a terrible family home life. It just isn't. It's ridiculous. If you have a super yacht but you're lonely and nobody that really matters to you on it, what's the point? it's
Yeah.
it's crazy to me. That's at least my belief. I've never owned a super yacht, so maybe you can get someone who has, and they can counter the point quite effectively. But um, it's easier for me because there is this thing called a lawyer, and there is this thing that a lawyer gets to do, which is talk and communicate. And I just happen to have an aptitude for that and be in a job that is that, and they connect. The great thing about law is it's a super wide church. My business partner, Clarice, hates going to court. She doesn't enjoy it whatsoever. She's the most methodical person I've ever met. The way that she thinks, the way that she can take a document and within an hour find everything wrong with it and draft it in such a way as to protect the client in ways that I could never fathom is a gift. It's her gift. She is a lawyer too. We are both lawyers. We're both great lawyers. We're just good in different ways. And that's the cool thing about the law, is that it's a broad church. Generally speaking, a lot of things are broad churches. I imagine if I had stuck it in banking and kept following it and something about it spoke to me, there'd be a niche in banking where my personality would shine, and it would make me feel fulfilled. There's always something you can do. There's some step you can take that's going to at least move you towards a goal. Sometimes that means that before you can get to the nice thing, you've got to do some stuff you're not crazy about. But there's always some step you can take that makes the situation more palatable.
Yeah. Okay, you were talking quite a bit about mental health challenges. Actually, before we do that, I wanted to share something. A lot of people who subscribe to the podcast in the past have referenced something really cool with regards to Vin Jiang, or they really look up to him because he made some incredible decisions. If you're not aware of him, he was you know,
Vin Jiang is a wonderful guy. I've watched all of his content.
mm,
I think he's great.
it's incredible. Um, and for him, he started realizing that he needed to start shifting towards bigger, better, and more impactful rather than just broader, which is why you don't see him doing as many podcasts anymore. I was lucky to get him at just the right time. He hasn't been doing as many podcasts anymore. He's been doing his own podcast with Ali Terai, who's great as well. He just doesn't do as many online sessions with a whole lot of different employees. He's more focused. He's become more intentional. And the reason I'm sharing that is because you can start, if you're trying to find your purpose, you can start really broad. You can go broad and go, yeah, cool. It could be anything out of this, out of all these options, anything. It really could be. And that's great. Let's start exploring them. But when you really hone in on what it is, then it's time to start narrowing down and start to really focus on, well, what do you want and what is going to be most important to you, as well as to important to in your words, how would you be able to best align the actions you're taking or the process of the actions you're taking with what's actually most important to you and your values. And so that brings us nicely in towards this realm of mental health. You've shared that there have been mental health challenges along the way and tragedies and the like as well. Do you want to? Are you comfortable to elaborate on some of those?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, speaking from a personal experience, I've had anxiety for as long as I could recall. I'm neurodiverse. I have an ADHD diagnosis, and it's quite hard. Uh, ADHD, one of the comorbidities, so the things that go with it is anxiety. And so I'm anxious all the time. I worry about things constantly. It's just one of the realities of um, life as someone who has this condition. And I have to work very, very hard in order to overcome that natural impetus for anxiety. And it's awful. It's truly, really hard. I mean, the most common mental health condition is anxiety, but it's really hard. And not just for me, for the people who love me, to watch me have these meltdowns about stress and whatnot. Um, but, and I always used to think, why me? Like, how unfair is it that I have this, that I have to live with this? There's 80% of the world that don't. Like, lucky them, right? And as I've gotten older, I've realized actually this anxiety, the ability to worry as much as I do, has been really helpful when it comes to my job. And it's actually allowed me to really empathize with what a lot of my clients are going through. And when it comes to mental health, a lot of my clients have mental health challenges. A lot of them have been through traumas I can't even describe. And I think that one of the challenges we have as a society, and I'm very proud to say we're moving in the right direction. We're nowhere near where we need to be, but I feel at least as a society, the conversation is becoming more open that mental health matters. It's not weak to speak, and it's okay to not be okay. And we're kind of opening that door. For what it's worth, I actually think as a society, when there's a really bad crisis, we don't always get it right, but more, we tend to understand someone having an absolute crisis, screaming on the ledge. We get that. What I don't think we as a society are good at all is the general sense that I certainly know people go through, and I've gone through myself, of this hopelessness, this despair, this general unhappiness that permeates society. I don't know what's caused it. I can't speak to that. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a psychologist, but it's there. And a big part of the work that I do is helping people realize that they're not alone, that people that they look up to and maybe think are successful have the same challenges, and it can get better. I've tried every day for 36, 35, or almost 36, 35 plus years not to have anxiety. I'll always have it. It's gotten a lot better though. It may continue to get better, but it's one day at a time. It's like someone who has a substance addiction. It's one day at a time. You take it every single day at a time, and you do your best. You create rituals. Those rituals help, and you set yourself up as best as you can to succeed. And I really, it breaks my heart when I see a lot of the hopelessness that particularly younger people tend to have about the future, and about how they just don't think that it's going to get better for them. And it's understandable too. For a teenager going through their first heartbreak, that is literally the hardest thing they've ever gone through. And yet we write it off as puppy love. We're completely dismissive of this person's experience, notwithstanding the fact that objectively for them, it is the worst thing they've ever gone through. And I think we're not particularly kind to people, um, when it comes to accepting that maybe they're having a tough time of it.
You've got the right foundations to be an exceptional father, at least according to the parenting experts I've already hosted. Um, the You're talking about, oh, it's just puppy love. Just wait until your 3-year-old wants a granola bar and you don't have any left. To them, it is the end of the world. It's a massive thing, and we don't have that for our kids. We don't have that for the younger generations. We don't have that for each other or for ourselves or for the older generations either. We tend to dismiss other people's traumas ultimately as just their trauma, not our problem, just their trauma. That's their problem. You're clearly trying to make a mark on this. Have there have there been any times that, so when you're talking about anxiety, how worrying has been really helpful for you? It reminded me of Ray Dalio, one of Ray Dalio's principles that he keeps sharing. If you worry, you don't need to worry. If you don't worry, you need to worry. But have there been any times where this anxiety and ADD have really held you back, have really held you down, or like really caused frustration or a sense of, not just a sense of helplessness, but actually taken you away from the impact and the purpose and everything you wanted to do?
Oh, absolutely. I've been to some dark places. If I can tell you that there haven't been times where I've, considered, not for many, many years, but certainly probably in my early 20s, whether it would be better if I wasn't even here, um if it would ever get better, if it would ever be okay, studying at university, even though I had an aptitude for academics, if the subject didn't interest me inherently, I wouldn't participate meaningfully. And so it really was, and you've got all these people saying, you're so smart, why don't you just apply yourself? It's like, well, it just doesn't work that way. If I don't, you know, if I don't care, I can't make myself care. I have this executive dysfunction, which says that if if there is not this, I, I I get it. I know what I have to do. I just can't do it. And you're sitting there screaming. It's like, I'm telling you, I can't do it. I wish I could. And we're getting better at it. We're getting better at understanding it. Um, but yeah, absolutely, it's made me feel held back. It can be quite confronting when it's like, this is the deadline, and you're looking at you're looking there. You've locked yourself in the room. You've done all the steps, and you know you need to do it. And the irony is, when you when you do actually attack the task, or when when you get regulated in the right way, it takes like 15 minutes. Like this thing that
Right.
you've blown up into this giant dinosaur and monster, it's actually not that hard. So I get it. I really do get it. And I think that as I've gotten older, I've become far more forgiving of other people, because you do rebuild your history, right? Like you do reach like in your 30s, and you forget some of the struggles, you forget some of the challenges, you forget some of the stuff. In a very real way, as awful as COVID was, it was probably the worst time of my life. Um, the lessons and the values that it taught, the things that it showed me, the importance of family again, the how quickly all of the things that I 100% had certainty in could be taken away, and how important it is to just take it day by day. Those are real gifts. And one thing it certainly reminded me was the fragility, of of I guess the relationship that people have with their past. It's very. I'm guilty of this. I was representing a lovely young man. He's a good guy. He has had some horrible trauma. A couple of years ago, made a mistake, helped him. Judge said, don't do it again. I said, don't do it again. I won't do it again, Jahan. 2 years later, does something similar. And a big part of it was like, this idiot, What is he doing? Let's write him off. And I actually had to stop myself to be like, Jahan, when you were that age, you would probably have done dumb stuff again and again. It's not, and certainly if you had the traumas that he had, you need to rein yourself in. And you just have to constantly remind yourself everyone's struggling and everyone's going through some stuff, and try to look at it with grace. It's not always easy, particularly in my line of work. Like I'll get an email from some opposing counsel that is just shy of abuse. And it makes you want to get in your car, drive to their office, pull them over a table and just like clobber them. And you have to remind yourself, this is a human being. They've got their own stuff that they're going to. They can't speak to you that way. It's very important. And I think there's a delineation that really needs to be drawn, that sometimes people do talk to you in an unacceptable way and you need to call them out on that. But trying to deal with other people with grace has been a really helpful thing. And it's also extending the same leniency to yourself. I used to I read a great book, Self-Compassion by Christine Knopf, some time ago. A really game-changing book for me. I used to talk to myself in a way that you would never talk to your worst enemy. Like I would be like, fool, how could you mess that up? You're an idiot, you're this, you're that, with any mistake. It's not productive, it's not helpful, it's not useful. And you just like, you have to be like, well, would you talk to your inner child that way? Would you talk to a child that way? Would you, a child forgets to send an email because they've had 300 things to do. Would you call them an idiot? Would you say they're useless? Would you rage at them for 15 minutes? Of course not. You would say, you shouldn't have done that. Next time, please focus some more, but it's okay. We'll fix it. And it's sort of building those bridges and learning those lessons. I'm not perfect. I mess it up far more than I get it right, but at least I think I've got at a macro level of consciousness, awareness of we're all kind of struggling and we're all just, that nice phrase from Ram Dass, we're all just strangers walking each other home.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is that there's a difference between enforcing boundaries and aggression. And it sounds like the difference is a sense of compassion towards the other person.
I think that's right. And look, it's difficult, right? Because at least 2 to 3 times a year, because I try to be affable, I try to be nice, I try to be polite. At least 2 to 3 times a year, somebody will view that behavior as a sign of weakness. And it's almost like 2 to 3 times a year, I have to have the same sort of conversation, which is fundamentally words to the effect of, you seem to have mistaken my pleasant demeanor and my desire to be a good person as an inability to tear your eyes out and destroy you. I am choosing to be this way, but I am perfectly capable of being the other way. And if you test me, you will see what I am capable of. So it's best that you do not. I don't like having that conversation, but I think that it's important that you be willing, ready, and able to defend yourself and your rights. Because otherwise, there are people who will take advantage of you. There are people who will cross boundaries. And a big part of, I guess, what I do is I stand up every day for other people's rights. I can't do that unless I stand up for my own rights as well.
Yeah, otherwise you're a plumber with leaky taps. So what are some of the main mental health challenges that lawyers have, specifically lawyers?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of us are type A personalities, and there's a lot of anxiety, and and because there are huge consequences if you don't do something, there's a level of constant neurotic distress, which is really, really toxic. Because for a lot of lawyers, we take it, our experience of life is a snapshot of the worst moments of someone else's.
Yeah, okay.
And helping them through that, right? So, that perspective is not really there. And two, the demand and the vicarious trauma is substantial. You can't help someone through their case if you don't at least in some way understand them and empathize with them and feel for them. You know what I mean? It's you should care about what happens to them. You should be doing your best to sort of alleviate that, but it leads to a lot of vicarious trauma. And also it does have elements of toxicity. There is a lot of bullying, particularly from older members of the profession to younger members. There is a lot of hours that are completely unreasonable. There is real lacks of work-life balance. And there's workaholism and a rewarding of workaholism. I try not to be, but I definitely am. I'm sure I fit the clinical definition of workaholism. I say that because I love what I do, it's somehow different, but it's probably not.
How many hours a week you working?
Well, look, I've gotten a lot better, but it would not be uncommon to work 50 to 60.
Yeah, right. Uh, do you envision that changing?
I have made a conscious decision that I'm going to try to do less. And I've improved a lot. I've improved a lot. Like, I'll take a full weekend now, and I'll do this and that. Um, it's hard, right? Because when you love what you do, it doesn't always feel like work. Up to the 60 hours, sometimes plus, maybe 7 hours feels like work. Most of it feels great. It feels exciting. It feels invigorating, but it takes away time from the things that you need to do to keep yourself happy, effective, running properly. And that's sort of I mean, I think that work-life balance really is a myth. There are going to be sprints, there are going to be rests, there are going to be this and that. But to ignore it completely and say it's just this, and it's about living it as well, right? It's very easy for us to have a seminar on don't get stressed, do meditation. It's about getting up, doing the meditation. It's about finding something that works for you, and understanding, I guess, your identity is more than your job. That's been the big challenge for me. For me, my identity has been so wrapped up in I am this lawyer who helps people that a lot of the other aspects of my personality may not have gotten the love that they need. And as I get further along, I'm trying to develop those aspects while still recognizing that I can be that lawyer that helps people.
Um, yeah, look, this is a relevant time to share it, I guess. When I was giving that example earlier, which I haven't shared all too often actually, of those 5 people who wanted help with drinking too much, and with drinking less. The main thing which changed for them, and this is fundamental for everything which I apply to life now as well, and for everyone who I help. So please take notes, people. This is very much aligned with what Jahan just said, which is why I'm raising it. Um, if you define yourself as an alcoholic, I am an alcoholic, then when it comes time to not drinking, it's like, oh, I shouldn't drink, but I'm an alcoholic. So you take the drink because that's your identity, right? If you're identifying yourself as a workaholic, it's like, oh, I should go back home to my family or to my wife, or I should go and take care or do some rest, or I shouldn't do exercise this morning. I should go into the office instead. But I'm a workaholic. I work a lot. That's who I am. I just work a lot. So therefore, you end up taking the drink, right? Working a lot, which only leads to more problems. The way to shift it in your life is to shift your identity away from being a workaholic. Instead of saying, I am not a workaholic, but even that still is focusing on where you don't want to go. It's like, I'm committed to living life with more whole of life balance. I'm committed to spending time and fostering the relationships with people that I really need to. I'm committed to looking after my own mental health and well-being. I get such a big shift. And the whole purpose of this conversation, all these conversations, right, is bringing mentors to people so that they can start enacting some change in their lives. Do you have any other tips along those lines? Like if people, especially with the workaholic one, because that's the one which you're still in the middle of, but just coming out of now.
Well, you've nailed it. For me, affirmations are really important. They do change things for you. So one of the things I always do, and if this is your takeaway, you're welcome. It's really changed my life. Every single day before I walk out the door, as I touch that doorknob, I say, "Today is going to be a good day," and I go out the door. And I mean, I do a lot of stuff. My morning ritual is pretty intense, but that to me is the golden jewel. And you'll be surprised how often it is a good day. And even if it's not a good day, objectively, bad stuff happens, I'm looking for the good. And then when I get home, I go, what made today a good day? And I'll make a list in my head of the good things that happened. And just that shift has been really profound for me. You know, for me, what's helped a lot with my work, with workaholism, and I no longer see myself as a workaholic. I see myself as someone who's making a difference. I'm a difference maker, and uncoupling. And remember, lawyers sell time. That's our resource. We do sell time. So time being money is absolutely something. We bill in 6-minute increments. For me, realizing that 1 hour of time can be multiplied dramatically if you use it in the right way. That that same hour can be utilized in so many different ways. And working 1 hour more doesn't necessarily lead to 1 hour better. If you're tired, it's only 10 minutes better. That 1 hour is really a waste. And if you're fresh and doing the right things, that 1 hour can be 100 hours, has been very helpful. But for me, I've just been on my honeymoon. Just got back on Monday actually, so a few days ago, and walking completely away from my business, trusting my team, trusting my staff. I've come back. They did not do things the way that I thought they should do it. They did things differently. They didn't do it to what I would say was my absolute best standard. They did a great job, far better than I gave them credit for. The conversation I had in my head that without you there, the ship will sink was completely incorrect. They did an amazing job. They made me very proud. They made me realize that I need to learn a few things about leadership and management and that I can take some stuff on board from my team. And seeing that has been really important. Often you build this narrative in your head that, oh, I'm the savior. Only I can do it. Only I can turn up and fix it. No one's as good as I am. You might be the very best, but often 80% of your expertise or skill is sufficient. Anything beyond that doesn't really add. And so becoming comfortable with your job as the leader is to empower other people to succeed versus you being the big wazoo has been really transformative for me.
Okay. And how can you give some examples of some of the ways that your message and you sharing your message about mental health, especially for lawyers, has helped? Can you give examples of how some lawyers, as a result of addressing their mental health, have transformed their lives, their families, their purpose, and everything which they do?
So, because I'm not a clinician,
Yes.
I read a lot. I'm big on biohacking. I'm big on the research. I read a lot of these books. I've also committed the sin of reading a book for the sake of reading the book and not applying a single thing in it and being like, well, I'm so well read, I know everything. But um, what really is powerful, what I'm doing a lot of, is just sharing my story, talking quite candidly about the things that affect me and being as authentic as I can be. And, you know, the messages that come in from colleagues, Jahan, thank you for sharing that. I was burnt out. You saying that you were burnt out really made me feel, that it was okay to speak about it with someone, or, sharing a story about when I was racially discriminated against earlier in my career, or sharing a story about when I stood up to a magistrate that was being unfair, or sharing a story about when I failed. Those sharing of those stories opens kind of, because, people, whether I like it or not, look up to me. I don't know why they do. I'm more flawed than anyone you can conceivably imagine, but some people do. And, how lucky am I that they've entrusted me with, they've created a vision of me and entrusted me with an idea of someone that they at least has some characteristic that they like. And so I think just by being candid and honest that I am flawed and I'm doing my best and that I don't always get it right has been really transformative and powerful for people. And so it's about sharing those sort of stories. I can tell you right now, one of the highlights of my life is someone I worked with very closely for a very long period of time. And one of the big values for us at our firm is people first. We hire people who may not traditionally be what you would think a lawyer would be like. We hire people that don't look like what you'd think a lawyer would look like, come from different backgrounds, come from different. We have people who look like lawyers and people who fit that mold, but a lot of people, we give them that chance, and they almost always live up to what you'd expect and do better than we would have ever expected. And somebody I work with very closely, someone amazing, really talked to themselves in a really dark fashion and spoke to them in a way that was not kind. And they one day reached out to me and just said, Jahan, because you speak to us and speak to me in particular so kindly, it's really changed the way that I speak to myself. And it's really made me believe in myself. And I just wanted to thank you. You could give me every success in the world. That 1 minute conversation about that has meant more to me. I'm tearing up just thinking about it, that someone I care about feels better because of that. And that's what it's about. The value of conversations like this one, Harry, really to me is that you can have the conversation without actually having the person there. You can listen, and in listening, you can have parts of the thing flow through to you that profoundly affect the way that you think. Every morning I spend 10 minutes inspiring myself. I read things that I find inspirational. I watch videos that I think are inspirational. I do that, and not every day something comes out that inspires me. Sometimes things do. And like, it's a conversation which was one way, but it's helped me.
Yeah, there's a lot there's a lot of well, there have been a lot of conversations and podcasts about how to find mentors and how to get mentoring in your life, and ultimately how to improve your life if you don't have the right people around you. So find the right people to be around you. They don't have to be physically in your life. It's amazing. It's been transformational for me to have the right people around me. I realized that I'd become a mentor to so many of my clients and the like, but I didn't have mentors myself. As soon as I shifted that, another nice big leap forward has occurred, and those mentor relationships become very close friendship relationships. Actually, it's beautiful. But if you don't feel confident to reach out to people, you can still absorb their knowledge, their wisdom. And you can do that by understanding their journey and the decisions that they've taken to get where they are. Because most of the time, if you were to have a mentor, like say for example, someone listening to this goes, "Wow, Jahan's amazing. I've got this career decision. I've got to make a decision on what I'm going to do. I should reach out to Jahan." Well, they can actually just listen to this. And all they'd really be getting from you if they were talking to you face to face or having a coffee or Zoom call, whatever, they'd still just be getting pretty much the same thing as what you've just shared here. You've shared that you didn't know if it was the right step. There was a little bit of fear around it. You just knew it wasn't the right place for where you were wasn't the right place where you wanted to be. So you were quite risk averse as well, perhaps also because of your background. And you chose to make the most intelligent guess at the next step that you possibly could. And you made the decision to move forward, and you kept making that same decision each time, and you found that you had people who believed in you and trusted in you, and you found ways to also believe and trust in yourself while having greater self-awareness. Like you, if anyone's listening to this and they're like, I wish that Jahan would be my mentor, it's like, hey, just stop for a moment and just repeat those things back to you. You've already got Jahan as a mentor. Congratulations. um,
You've nailed it. I mean, I think that you've raised a few really important things in what you've said that kind of speak to me. The first is, for me, I love books, I love reading, I love history. There is something so beautiful when you read something and it's a feeling that you thought only you have ever had, and it's an emotion that you were, and it captures perfectly a feeling that you thought was unique to you, and then you realize the person who wrote it is not you. They may not even be alive anymore, but they felt this thing, and it's beautiful. It's this connection across time and space. For me, philosophy has brought a lot of peace to my life. A lot of my mentors are Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, and people who studied under the Stoic school of philosophy. I found that very powerful. For me, one of the biggest mentors I've ever had is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. To me, that's one of the real cornerstone books. I never had the privilege of meeting Viktor Frankl, but what it taught me was so profound, so important, so useful that it's affected a lot of the things that I do. And I always feel bad whenever somebody reaches out and says, "Hey, can we get a coffee?" and this and that. I always feel bad saying no, and if I can, I do. I really do try to. But this need for certainty, there's no answer I can give you that is going to be better than the answer you yourself give, unless it's something unique. Like if you come to me with a criminal law question, of course I know more than you. I've done it for a decade. I know I'm so good at it that it's what I literally sell in order to put food on the table. Okay, sure. But generally speaking, with your career, the world has changed so much in such a short period of time. Nothing I tell you will be relevant from my experience. When I was in law school, same sex marriage was illegal. Cryptocurrency was not a thing. I've done so many cases now where it's a same sex couple arguing over a Bitcoin wallet that it will blow your mind. None of those were a thing when I was in law school. And so coming to me and saying, "Jahan, what should I think?" I can tell you, look, I think these are the macro trends. I already talk about all of that on my social media. I think these are the macro trends you need to look out for and the micro trends. But generally speaking, these are the skills, da da da. There's nothing I can really, there's limited value that I can add. But it the one thing, I guess, the lesson, the piece of information is a point will come in your life. It came for me probably in my early 30s where you realize the big risk is not taking risks. It is far more dangerous by a factor of 1,000 to live the safe life than it is to take chances. That taking chances, because if you live the safe life, you're going to have the average experience or the below average experience. You're going to be following the herd and you're going to get what you get. At least if you take risks, calculated, sensible risks, you have the chance, the very small chance, but the chance of having the things that matter to you. So the biggest risk in life is not taking risks. Sensible risks, well thought out risks, but risks nonetheless. There is nothing you will do that is perfectly safe.
And it's a beautiful way to kind of summarize this conversation. Usually I go back through and I share the key takeaways which I've gotten, but I mean we've been doing that off and on for the last 30 minutes either way. But there's been, if I had to summarize it down to anything, there's a sense of self-awareness, self-confidence, and purpose, and taking risks. And pretty much you could try and summarize the majority of your worldview of what you just shared in the last hour and a half in that kind of across those four buckets.
That's right. These are the things that matter. I think there are attributes that successful people share. I think there are certainly things that I see over and over again when I meet people that I would define as successful. But as a general proposition, it is having a purpose. It is moving towards that purpose. It is progress. It is, I certainly, I know a lot of people do, but I certainly spent years of my life, questioning what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose? What is this, why? And it is the question is, as I said, I'm sure Alan Watts I think it's Alan Watts who said, it's like asking a chess master, what is the next move, master? What's the best move? It's crazy. Without context, you can't answer that. And getting comfortable with that what is the meaning of life? I can tell you what it is for today, maybe for the next month, maybe for the next year, maybe abstractly until the end of time. But it will shift, it will change. I don't have the privilege of being a parent yet. If I become a parent, hopefully the meaning of my life is to be a great parent as part of that. Right now, it's not to be a great parent because I'm not a parent. But it changes as you go along and you find things that matter to you and find things that speak to you. The purpose becomes to, you know what I mean?
It's an interesting point which you're alluding to. It's and now reflecting on your journey again, it sounds like you've uncovered your purpose whenever you've found yourself more responsible for people. And when you found yourself responsible for people that you care about, you've found a deeper sense of purpose, or you've at least started to hone in and narrow down a little bit more on what your purpose is at that time while you're responsible for them.
It's right. And it's sort of also stripping away a lot of the misconceptions you have about success, power, and responsibility. Often when I speak to people, particularly junior people, they have this notion that once you hit the top, life gets easier. Uh-huh. Like you just smoke a big cigar, you put your feet up, and you can leave the office at 2 p.m. and everything's right. You show up in your Porsche. I can tell you this, as you move up, it gets infinitely harder. You have to work much, much harder. You have to be even more humble and you have to add more value. That's okay. There is no point in life where, maybe there is, I certainly haven't found it, where life becomes easy, where all of the difficulty of life goes away. You have to be comfortable with that struggle. For me, who's wired towards action, I like to think of myself as a man of action. The hustle culture thing of, pressure doesn't break you, it makes you, really appeals. But it's not, there are people who are more prone to procrastination, or I would say more prone to going with the flow. For them, not pushing yourself too hard speaks to you. Pressure doesn't break you, it makes you. That is healthy until a point, and then it becomes unhealthy. It becomes this crazy hustle until you die mentality. And going with the flow, she'll be right, mate, is healthy to a point until it's not healthy. Your goal is at any given stage to, I guess, try to stay within the healthy range. And
Eustress,
that's
right?
a dynamic balance. Yeah,
Right.
it's a dynamic balance.
Like there's a whole study of work which is showing that distress causes frustration. That's the working way too hard, too uncomfortable, too crazy. The no stress at all doesn't get you anywhere either way either. Your peak performance is going to be in eustress, like you as in like euthanasia type eustress,
Yeah.
where you're in stress but you're not, your amygdala is not flying off. You're in a stress that's focusing your prefrontal cortex exactly where it needs to be. You're not overwhelmed by everything else that's happening in your life. Um, Look, I've loved this conversation. It feels like it's coming to a really natural close, and I want to give you the opportunity to share anything else that you wanted to share with the listeners off the back of everything which was spoken about. Is there anything which you wanted to really emphasize or really clarify, or any extra message that you wanted to share after along this topic of living a more successful and purposeful life?
Well, one of the things, I hate talking about myself and spruiking myself. One of the things that I think is super important is meditating on concepts and giving them time to soak in. So one of the projects I'm embarking on, and once it's done, I'd love to get your feedback on it, Harry. Is
Good pleasure.
I'm creating a book of quotes that have really inspired me personally. And really, I'm gonna be producing that, and um, I would urge anyone who listens to this, once now I've given myself a deadline to get it done, by speaking to you, to look into that. One of the things that has been really transformative for me is every single day meditating for just a minute on something that someone in history who has been successful has said or done, and just realizing that, you know, and I've got this, over the years, I've collected this huge quote library because I think the human experience is profound and beautiful and deep, but it's also so similar. And you read quotes from like Sun Tzu, and you compare that to quotes from, Helen Keller, and, um, Nelson Mandela, to Anne Frank. And you just see that there is this beautiful sense of understanding something about humanity. So that to me is a really powerful thing to do. I have never been more sad or worried than when I felt alone. And so one of the things I urge everyone to do is reach out. Doesn't have to be to me, but reach out to someone. And if you have literally no one to reach out to, there are services, go to them, and that's a start. For people who have no one and they feel overwhelmed, one of the best pieces of advice I can give is, when you have nothing, give something. Volunteering has really helped me. It's been a really powerful thing for me when I've felt like, oh my God, there's I'm feeling purposeless, I'm feeling worthless. Helping people who have even less has just been so helpful. And it really does. I can guarantee you right now, within 2 minutes of each and every one of us, there is a place that could benefit immensely from you, your enthusiasm, your energy. So um, reach out, form communities, form parts of things, volunteer at something that interests you. If you're into music, you know, see what you can do to, teach kids who maybe have some sort of challenge to learn to love something as much as you do. I love history. One of my big goals is, when I retire, I'm going to be a museum history guide. Those free volunteers that you see, those nice old people who walk you around a museum and say, look at Tutankhamun. I'm gearing up for that. That's going to be my, hopefully, retirement plan, is to do that, because I love history. I love talking about it. I love, interesting little tidbits about things that have happened. Did you know the Persians were the first people to create the idea of a modern refrigerator?
I didn't.
Yeah, so they created these things called yakhchals, which are these giant pyramids made with egg white and all sorts of compost and other bits and pieces, and they would freeze water in it. And even in the desert summer, it kept food cold. That's a cool fact. That makes me happy.
Right.
I would like to share that fact, and I now have with your entire audience, which makes me really happy. But there's always something you can do. And if you feel like you have nothing, give something. If you don't have resources, give time. If you don't have time, give a thought. There's always something you can do. So the antidote for me for a lot of my ennui has been giving. And I think if you keep giving, eventually the universe, the powers that be, your community will give back to you, and they'll give back to you in spades.
That's a perfect note to end it on. Thank you, Jahan.
Harry, pleasure, man. Thank you.
So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, practice it now, be the successful person you're meant to be, live with purpose.